establishing these wealth building habits in our 30s, which is going to grow assets in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. My name is George Sardakis. I'm an associate at Hirsch Financial Services. And today we're going to talk about how we can build wealth in our 30s. Now, our 30s are a very important financial decade in our lives, and most people don't realize it until we're leaving. And the decisions that we can make in our 30s and 40s are going to help really set us up for success in our 50s and 60s and all the way through retirement. So today we're going to talk about a practical roadmap and some takeaways that we can walk away with for what to prioritize, how to order them, and why the sequence matters. When we talk about building wealth in our 30s, it really starts with putting a foundation together and making sure that we have that in place. We have to make sure that we have an emergency fund put together that captures about 3 to 6 months of our income. And we have that placed in a high yield liquid savings account. And the reason for this is because if God forbid something happens, we don't want to have to take out credit card debt and have to dip into our checkings and take away from our lifestyle expenses. And the reason this is so important is because if something happens and we lose our job, or we catch a flat tire, or we get sick, we want to make sure that we're not taking out excessive credit card debt. We have that cushion to fall back on to cover those emergency expenses. The second non-negotiable is making sure that we eliminate high interest debt. These are debts that typically carry double-digit interest rates, such as personal loans or high interest rate car loans, or having excessive credit card debt. We want to make sure that we're not spending excessive money on paying down high interest rate debt that can take away from the money that we can use to put to work to help to build and exacerbate our wealth building strategies. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of our employer match for our 401k program. This is the single most common and costly mistake when we're in our late 20s, early 30s, is that we're not taking advantage of our 401k plan that's offered by our employer. A lot of retirement wealth is built through 401k and employer-sponsored programs. And that's a big deal because that's what's going to help fund our retirement later down the road. The quicker and the sooner that we can establish these retirement building habits through deductions from our paycheck that we're not going to see anyway, is just going to help build the foundation and put together a very successful retirement later down the road. And that's what's going to really help to cement our wealth later. Finally, we want to make sure that we're carrying adequate insurance coverage. That would be life insurance, health insurance, and disability insurance. We want to make sure that we have our life insurance in place to help to replace the income that's lost when we're no longer here, for our kids, for our spouses, whoever is important to us. We want to make sure that they have what they need when we're no longer here. With regards to health insurance, we want to make sure that we have this insurance in place to help cover the costs of different medical expenses. If we go to see an orthopedic, if we go to get surgery, if we get sick and we go to the emergency room, these are costs that could be covered by health insurance companies instead of taking thousands of dollars out of pocket that could have been used and implemented in other wealth building strategies. Disability insurance helps us to make sure that if we incur disability, whether it's short or long term, the income that's lost is replaced to a certain degree. So whether we're on maternity leave, or if we need to get surgery, or if we have a longer disability, the income that's going to be generated through that disability insurance is going to help cushion the blow of the income lost from not being able to work. The final type of insurance coverage that we want to make sure we have is liability insurance. This would be things like if we own a home and someone gets hurt on our property. If they were to sue us, they're not going to be suing us for a nominal amount of money. They're going to try to take a decent chunk of change out. So having liability insurance in place to make sure that we're not coming out of pocket for tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars cause garnishment of wages, could cause seize of assets. Having that liability insurance is going to help cushion that blow and really help to provide the security that we need to help protect us. It's really a protection from major lawsuits if, God forbid, those were to happen. Once we have those foundations in place, then we can implement the wealth building sequence. And the order that we implement this sequence matters just as much as the amount that we deploy. So we want to make sure that we're capturing the full employer 401k match, whether it's 5% of salary or 4% of salary. We want to make sure that we're actually contributing and taking advantage of at least the employer match. And then anything above and beyond that is just voluntary contributions, which still matter. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of health savings accounts or HSA contributions if we participate in a high deductible plan. And the reason for this is because the HSA will offer a triple tax advantage. We have tax deductible contributions going into the account. We have tax deferred growth since the account is invested. And then we have tax free withdrawals for qualifying medical expenses. And so that really helps to cushion the blow and help to provide funding for major medical expenses such as surgery or ER visits or anything along those lines. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of a Roth IRA or Roth 401k Roth option if we have it available to us. Now, there are income limits with regards to making contributions to Roth IRA. So if we have a Roth 401k, that could be just as or even more powerful than contributing to a Roth IRA. Even though funds to Roth accounts are made on a post-tax basis, which means that if we make $100,000 a year, and we make a $5,000 contribution to a Roth IRA, then we're still getting taxed on that $100,000 income, as opposed to traditional pre-tax money means that instead of getting taxed on $100,000, now we're getting taxed on $95,000. But what happens is Roth funds grow tax deferred and then tax free withdrawals in retirement. And that's a big deal, especially when we're trying to make sure that we're minimizing taxes in retirement to help cushion the blow of Medicare expenses and really help us navigate retirement income strategies, which will be covered in another video. We want to make sure that we're also taking advantage of taxable brokerage accounts. So these would be after-tax accounts that we can utilize and make withdrawals from before retirement. These also offer flexibility when it comes to contributions. There's no annual contribution limit to these after-tax accounts. We can make a $10,000 contribution, we can make a $50,000 contribution, or we can make a $5,000 contribution. There's no limitation as to how much we're able to fund the account in any given year. Now, what happens is these accounts are funded on an after-tax basis, similar to Roth, except the difference is if we make a $5,000 contribution and that account grows to $7,000, that additional $2,000 growth is taxed at what's called capital gains rate, which is a tax rate that's less than our normal income rate. And that's a big deal because when we're trying to fund financial goals or we need additional funding for a big project, instead of dipping into an emergency savings account or instead of taking on additional debt, we can utilize this after-tax non-retirement account before retirement without any penalty. We just have to pay a little bit of tax. And finally, implementing different vehicles or different strategies with regards to additional wealth building, which would be things like implementing a backdoor Roth, which is making a contribution to a traditional IRA and then subsequently rolling it into a Roth IRA and paying the taxes. This strategy is more common for those who make higher amounts of income and are limited as to how much or even disqualified from making direct contributions to Roth IRAs. The reason why Roth is so valuable in our 30s is because even in our 30s, we're still at a lower tax bracket than we're going to be in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. And we still haven't reached the income threshold for suspension of Roth IRA contributions on average. So being able to make these direct Roth contributions is going to really help to build a tax-free bucket that we can use for withdrawals and retirement. So even delaying all of these strategies for 2, 3, 4, 5 years is going to be a big deal, because those are 2, 3, 4, or 5 years of compounding that we lose, that it's just money left on the table. And those are just some additional strategies that we can implement. But at least making sure that we have points 1 through 5 covered is really going to help fuel the fire when it comes to establishing these wealth building habits in our 30s, which is going to grow assets in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. One key topic when it comes to helping professionals in our 30s build wealth is addressing lifestyle inflation. And that's when we have income that rises quickly and expenses that follow. So if we find a new job and we're making an additional $20,000 a year, we tend to want to spend a little more money. We tend to buy more things. We shop at better grocery stores. We buy a new phone. We do these different things. And that $20,000 before taxes, let alone after taxes, can be spent relatively quickly. So we want to make sure that we're putting these habits in place to help address our wealth building strategies before lifestyle inflation and lifestyle creep really takes hold of the additional funds that are coming in. So that creates a very notable distinction between a high income earner and a high net worth individual, because income doesn't automatically create wealth. And we see this a lot with athletes. Athletes who sign multi-million dollar or tens of millions of dollar contracts aren't always wealthy individuals. They don't have business ventures. A lot of athletes actually tend to retire and file bankruptcy or have to find another job, or they don't have enough money because they're taking care of this person, they're buying this thing, they're buying these houses, they're buying these cars, they're going out to these expensive dinners, and they don't really take the time to put a foundation together to help to create investments in wealth that can help them retire in their 30s and 40s when they're done playing. So having a pre-commitment to establishing these habits before we really start to make the lion's share of our lifetime earnings, it's going to help us make sure that that lifestyle inflation doesn't affect what it is that we're trying to build for ourselves. We can still have nice things and we can still spend money, but we want to make sure that it's not at the expense of the wealth that we're trying to create. So a practical application of this would be, for every additional dollar that we make through a pay raise or from a new job or a side hustle, we want at least 50% to go towards this wealth building venture, whether it's taking advantage of cash value life insurance, putting your money in a Roth IRA, putting additional money into our 401k plan, putting money in an after tax account, putting it into an HSA. We want to make sure that we're covering these different avenues as we are making more money. The biggest lifestyle inflation risk of the decade is the cost of housing. We've seen housing prices in the past couple of years just continue to explode, along with interest rates. So people who are buying houses are spending X amount more than people 10 years ago. So while having a house is a great asset, we want to make sure that we're also taking into account the mortgage cost, the insurance cost, and the cost of maintenance, which has also gone up, but not as loudly as the housing prices that we're used to seeing. One more key takeaway is making sure that we track our net worth, not just our spending. When we track our net worth, we want to make sure that we're not just tracking our assets, but we're tracking our liabilities. We want to make sure that our debts or our liabilities are going down the same or faster rate than our assets are growing. So that means that we're making additional payments towards credit card debt. We're making additional payments towards our car loans. We're making payments towards our student loans in an effort to help reduce those liabilities while our assets are growing. And that's just going to grow our net worth. So net worth is our assets minus our liabilities. So if that gap widens by paying down liabilities, even if our assets stay the same, our net worth is growing. If our assets increase while our liabilities stay the same, our net worth is growing. But if our liabilities shrink while our assets grow, our assets in different ventures such as our 401k or HSA or the appreciation of our homes, if they grow while our liabilities are shrinking, that's going to widen that net worth gap, which means that our net worth is growing faster. The final way that we can make sure that we're building and securing our wealth in our 30s is by making sure that we have a proper estate plan in place. Estate planning isn't just for people who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's all important at that time as well. But making sure that we have items such as our last will and testament, making sure that we have medical directives, making sure that we have powers of attorney. These are all documents and instruments that we have to make sure that we have in place to help protect our wealth. A last will and testament is an instrument that instructs the direction of our assets and who's going to be receiving them. So if we have a car that's worth a lot of money, we want it to be taken by our oldest child, then we have to state that in the will. If we have jewelry that we want our daughters to have, that has to be stated in our will. Making sure that we understand how our assets are directed is critical when it comes to preserving our wealth. On the flip side of asset direction, for a brief moment, in addition to wills, we have assets that pass by contract. These would be things like our bank accounts, making sure that we have beneficiaries listed on our life insurance, on our 401ks, on our taxable asset accounts, making sure that we understand and note a beneficiary or someone who is going to be receiving the funds that's not going to be passed by the will. That's another way to make sure that our assets are passed and preserved. So making sure that we list beneficiaries on our 401ks, on our IRA accounts, on our life insurance, making sure that we have transfer on death instructions for taxable assets like our after-tax brokerage account that we mentioned earlier. These are all items that are going to help our loved ones understand how mom or dad or sister or brother, how they wanted their assets to be passed when they're no longer here. Having a durable power of attorney is essentially designating an individual to manage our financial affairs if we're incapacitated. So if we hear it a lot when, grandma, grandpa, whoever has Alzheimer's, making sure that they have someone who's able to take care of them financially and take care of their financial accounts, someone who's responsible and trustworthy. That's making sure that those assets are protected and they're not being taken advantage of. Having a healthcare proxy or a medical power of attorney essentially designates someone to make medical decisions on our behalf when we're not in the capacity to do so. We've already gone over beneficiary designations for life insurance, 401ks, Roth IRAs, or any kind of other taxable investment accounts. Life insurance is also a big deal at this stage because we often have a mortgage in our 30s. We often have a lot of insurable responsibility. We're making a decent income. We want to make sure that our spouses or our children are taken care of through life insurance, which will provide a death benefit when we're no longer here. So life insurance death benefit typically wants to be in the vicinity of 10 to 12 times our annual income. So if we make $100,000 a year, we typically want about $1 million to $1.2 million in life insurance coverage, which just means that that's the income that's going to help to carry our loved ones forward for the next 10 to 12 years, covering things like a mortgage, car loans, student loans, education funding, etc. If we don't have these instruments in place, what tends to happen is it's usually the state who determines what happens to the assets when we're no longer here. And that's not something we always want. We want to make sure that the people that we want to be taken care of are, and we want to make sure that we have the power and we empower ourselves to direct those funds and those assets while we're still here. So with all that being said, putting the wealth building foundation together in our 30s is actually the perfect time because we have a good grasp on our cash flow. We are in the midst of our career and we're earning a decent paycheck, and we tend to have a lot of our affairs in order. And now we're just trying to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success in the future. So understanding the sequence, understanding that we have the foundation in place, and following these steps is just going to help make sure that we are setting ourselves up for that wealth success in the future. So making sure that we understand what our current net worth is, making sure that we have these different accounts, bill pay accounts, emergency savings, etc., in place as a launch pad for these strategies is crucial. With all that said, I hope this helps. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Follow me on the different platforms, Instagram and LinkedIn, and leave a comment below for different topics you want to see in the future. Thank you so much for watching.